Hello everyone and welcome to Civic Platform. This is your host Zuher Almusre. Today I'm covering an event titled with Financial Awareness Session for Winnipeg Women. So today Winnipeg women will have more information about their finance situation here in Winnipeg. So let's find out how it's important for them and to make them more settled and confident in Winnipeg. So let's jump right in.
Assalamu alaikum, Zuher. Thank you so much for having me. And salaam alaikum, everybody. Jesse here with Canadian Islamic Wealth. Today we are going to be getting into a session for women in Winnipeg all about financial literacy. I'm going to be talking about some of the biggest issues women face when it comes to their financial well-being. I'm going to be talking a little bit about life insurance and how to protect yourself. I'm going to be even talking about how to take advantage of accounts that are available to every single Canadian. You don't want to miss out on this. Please make sure you join us for this financial awareness session for Winnipeg women. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, sisters. I wanted to thank you guys for coming and attending this event, Financial Awareness for Sisters. One of the things that I have noticed, my name is Jesse. I'm a financial advisor with my company, Canadian Islamic Wealth, and we help Muslims all across the country save, invest, and grow their wealth in a halal way. And one of the things I believe is sorely lacking within our community is somewhere where sisters can go for a level of financial literacy and financial awareness. So I was really glad the MIA invited me to give this talk, because there are a few things that happen and have happened to clients that I've worked alongside where they are unable and they've gone through serious difficulty because there is not a level of financial literacy and financial awareness taught to sisters within our community. So inshallah, hopefully some of the tips and the things I give here today can benefit you so that you can make yourself, what I like to say, bulletproof financially from any calamity that comes your way. So the first thing I want to touch on here today, and this is probably a general reminder because one of the things I've noticed being married for 5 years now, alhamdulillah, is that sisters are well aware of the fact that they have no financial responsibilities in Islam, mashallah. But that being said, it still begs the question, it still is worth noting that in Islam, our sisters do not have any financial responsibilities. That burden falls on the men in your life, your father, your brothers, your sons, etc., your husbands, right? All of them are responsible for looking after you financially. And if they are not doing so, they are failing in a big part of their deen, which is to care and provide for the women in their life. And so when I talk about the financial responsibilities, I just want to make you aware that your wealth is your wealth. Your money is your money. And so taking a level of ownership and a level of responsibility for that money and for that wealth is really important, especially because you do not have financial responsibilities. The things that you do with money, I feel, are going to be, you're going to be asked about that on the day of judgment. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on within this reminder of financial responsibility is Islamic inheritance. So one of the things that often comes up as a topic of conversation within our communities is when one of the members of our family dies, right? Especially one of the men in our life. Oftentimes we hear within Islam that men get twice of what the women get. And a lot of times sisters, especially the ones who may not necessarily be practicing as much, may not necessarily be as knowledgeable, will see this as unfair, right? And what has happened in the past is that some brothers who have done their job of making their will Islamic and following the Sharia, following Islam, everything like this, they will have their will challenged in court by a sister who, without proper knowledge, comes along and says, well, this is discrimination. He's getting double of what I'm getting, and it's because I'm a woman, right? But with the proper knowledge and understanding of what Islam teaches, which is the fact that you have no financial responsibilities, and that brother of yours, who maybe he did in fact inherit more than you, but he has to spend that money on you if you're not married. He has to make sure that you're looked after and provided for. So when you understand what Islam teaches as far as Islamic inheritance goes, and as far as financial responsibilities go, I think that will clear up a lot of the issues that sisters see maybe as potentially unfair. And the last thing we want is to go through our life disobeying a law out of ignorance and different things like that. So that's the first thing I just wanted to briefly touch on and remind everyone on it. So if you are someone who, maybe you're a sister or you're a mother or whatever the case may be, and you have a Islamic will in place, make sure you're having this conversation with your daughters, with your sons, with everybody in the family, that here is the will, here is why we've set it up the way we have, because in Surah Nasiya, this is what it says, and I need you all to be okay with it, and this is why Islam does things the way it does. Because what we don't want is, we don't want members of the family being ignorant of the will, ignorant about how it's written, and then after you've passed away, or a member of the family has passed away, and going to Canadian court, challenging it, perhaps having it overturned, whatever the case may be, because that can spell very big problems both in the dunya and the akhirah. So now that we've kind of gone through that, what I want to talk about are three main points. The first is the major risks that I have seen in my practice as a financial advisor that cause sisters the biggest problems. And the first one is death. Death. And I don't necessarily mean your own death. May Allah give us a good death, but the death of a spouse, especially the one who's managing the family's finances. So one of the things that I've encountered in my years as a financial practice is, mashallah, many of the sisters' husbands have worked really, really hard to provide a level of financial stability for their wife and for their kids if they die unexpectedly. Unfortunately, they don't share any of this information with their wife. And so when they do die, they have the wife has no idea where anything is. They have no idea where the bank accounts are. They have no idea where the investment accounts are. They don't know if there's any life insurance there. They don't know how to get or access anything. And so when it comes time, because one of the things that happens, unfortunately, even when we die, is that the bills don't stop. You still got to pay rent, you still got to pay taxes, you still got to pay to keep the heat on, especially in Canada. You got to pay for your phone, your internet, all this other kind of stuff. And if you don't have access to the bank accounts and everything like this, which unfortunately some sisters don't, then there can be some serious situations. A couple of clients who've had their husband pass away have been to a point where they almost got evicted, right, or foreclosed on their house because they didn't know how to access the money. Alhamdulillah, they're okay. We managed to figure everything out, but this is one of those things that can be avoided with some simple communication. So what I have in front of you here is a personal financial review. And I think one of the best exercises that you can do, you can use this for something called a death folder. You can use this, you can do it electronically, you can do it on a Microsoft Word, whatever the case may be. But what you should do is you should go through this and you should fill in everything you possibly can. So where's your pension? Where's your spouse's pension? Where are the bank accounts? Are there RSPs? Are there tax-free saving accounts? Are there properties? Where are the properties? Are there properties here? Are there some properties back home? Fill in everything. Don't leave
back home?
Everything. Everything. Make sure that you don't leave anything, any details out. Now, again, maybe your spouse won't want to share everything with you. Who knows? But what I will say is that having that information readily available will make things so much easier if the worst things happen. You know, write in their life insurance policies, write in there any debts, right? Credit card, loans, mortgages, any of this other type of stuff. Debt is a very serious issue. If somebody passes away and they have debt, they will not enter Jannah even if they died a martyr, if they owe debt. This is a hadith by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So figuring out ways where all these assets are and if there is anything to pay off these debts, right? And if there's not something to pay off these debts, then we need to look at putting something in place that if somebody dies unexpectedly, is there going to be something in place to pay off the debt if somebody dies unexpectedly?
So is it only for one person, or we both can put in?
I would recommend
working as
you can both put it all in there. Like there's spots in here for two people, as you can see. But you know, fill it in with as much detail as possible, and not just financial assets, but also professionals that they use. One of the things that one of my clients went through was, unfortunately, they didn't know the names of the lawyers, they didn't know the names of the accountants, they didn't know the names of financial advisors, any of this stuff, right? And so having to scramble to figure out, you know, who they were in contact with, who did the taxes, and all of these loose ends will need to be tied up in some way, shape, or form. So having that basic information is really important. So yeah, that, cash flow, taxes, all of this, you should get that. The other thing that's on there is a list of things that you know, having a paper copy of wouldn't be terrible, right? So your things like the latest notice of assessment, right? You can get all that stuff electronically now. It's fairly easy to do, but having a paper copy that if somebody dies because you don't know their password and you don't know all this other kind of stuff, again, it's just going to make your life so much easier. So this will help you with the first D, death. It can also help you with the second D, which is divorce, right? Inshallah, I hope that never happens for anybody, but once again, what we don't want is a situation where injustice is being done to anyone, whether that be a sister or a brother, right? So having a list of all the assets, understanding what you are entitled to from an Islamic perspective is something that absolutely, you know, needs to be discussed, and we all need to think about if the worst case scenario happens, because unfortunately, and this is something that happens a little bit more commonly in the United States, is that people want everything to be taken care of the Islamic way until divorce happens, and then they want to go to the Canadian way, right, where they get half of everything, and they get the kids, and they get all this other type of stuff, so that they can get more money out of the situation, right? But we believe in Allah and we fear Allah, right? So we need to follow the proper Sharia when it comes to these matters. But having knowledge of all these financial dealings, all the financial transactions, it'll make you perfectly aware of what you are entitled to and whether or not your rights are being given to you by your spouse, or whether they're not. So this is probably the main and most important thing when it comes to the two biggest risks that sisters face, which is the death and divorce. Now, in the event that these things do come down the road, I highly recommend that everybody get at least a basic level of financial literacy. So a basic level of financial literacy is extremely important, because we don't know what we don't know. And so having if one of the spouses takes care, if your husband takes care of most of the finances, maybe you take care of most of the finances, but the other one should have a basic understanding of how everything works. When do you need to file your taxes each and every year? If you miss that, the government doesn't forgive anybody. Trust me on that one. So you need to make sure you know when to file the taxes, where to file the taxes, how to file the taxes, right? You don't necessarily need to do it yourself, but at least have some basic knowledge on how to do that, because you know, a famous saying is that there are two certainties in life, death and taxes, right? And so even if your spouse dies, you're still gonna have to file and pay taxes. And one of the things that especially senior citizens have gotten into trouble with is the fact that if your taxes are not filed, the government oftentimes will not allow you to have your Canada pension plan, your old age security, things that you need to rely on every single day. So making sure that you have a basic level of knowledge on how all of this works is going to protect you in the long run. Same kind of things. You know, how do you pay a bill online? You know, how do you access your bank account online? What are the account numbers? These are, you know, basic things. So like, how does my credit card work? What day do I need to make my credit card payment on time so that I don't have to pay 20% interest on purchases I make, right? You know, the bank sometimes will forgive if you're late once or twice, and you tell them like, hey, listen, this is the first time I was late a day. Can you give me a break on the interest? Sometimes they'll say yes, but if it's more than once, no, absolutely not. Maybe twice, right? So understanding how to pay that. Some banks are different, right? So I'll give you an example. If you pay a credit card from a bank with TD or RBC, the day that you pay is what will be recorded to the credit card company, right? But there are some banks that if you pay today, it won't be posted for 3 days. And so if the due date is today, right, and to them they won't get it till 3 days later, you're going to pay interest. So understanding how yours works, yeah. So paying 3 days early to make sure that you don't pay any interest is something that's really important. Understanding how investments work, right? So one of the things that I always recommend to everybody is to have an emergency fund. And so for sisters, because you have no financial responsibilities, your ability to kind of build up some level of an emergency fund would be something that I recommend just in case, right? So typically what you want is 3 months worth of expenses. So if you have this conversation with your husband and they say household expenses are around $3,000 a month, right? Let's just say, for example, you want to have about $9,000 readily available, that if something happens, there's money, there's cash there. And the reason you want that is so that you don't have to use credit cards, you don't have to borrow money, you don't have to go into debt and pay interest on that debt, right? So building up an emergency fund is something that I highly recommend and something that everybody should do. Another thing that everybody should learn how to do, but especially sisters, because from my experience, what I've seen is sisters are a little bit more risk averse, right? We don't want to see our money go down. We don't want to see our money lose. Totally fine. Nobody wants to see their money lose, right? But what we have to understand is that over time, if we do invest, typically it makes money, right? Over the long term. So if we are looking to save up for a goal, right? It could be retirement. It could be a trip to Hajj, right? Hajj is expensive. It's over $12,000 a person. So if we are taking deliberate action to put money away, invest it in a halal way, get a profit on those investments over, you know, a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year period, it's something that we need to think about and we need to consider. Because at the end of the day, one of the things that you've probably heard a little bit about in the news is inflation, right? We've probably noticed at the grocery store, we've probably noticed here and there, prices of everything are going up, right? So if you have $1,000 in your bank account today, given the price, the rate of inflation right now, it's only going to be able to buy maybe $950 worth of things next year, right? So what we need to do is we need to find a way to have the money that we're saving and putting aside keep up with inflation or do better. And the way to do that is by investing. So how do we invest? Now, I've been over this before in most of my general presentations, but there are 3 main accounts that most sisters end up using, and one of these especially is really important for most of the sisters I've ever dealt with. So one of them is the RSP. This is a registered retirement savings plan, and how it works is every single year you get 18% of your income, or about $30,000 of room, whichever of the two is lower. So if you do work, and let's say you earn $100,000 in a year, or $50,000, or whatever the case may be, 18% of that you get as RSP room. So if we use the number of 50,000, you'll get $9,000 of contribution room. And what will happen is if you put money into this RSP, it'll lower how much tax you pay. And for the grand majority of people, it'll increase how much you get as a tax refund, right? So, and here's why. When you get a paycheck, the government takes off tax automatically right away. And so if you're earning $50,000 a year, the government has already taken tax off of that. But if you put $1,000 into your RSP, or $2,000, $5,000, that means instead of having taxed you on $50,000, the government really should have only taxed you on $45,000. So you end up saving, $1,000 to $1,500. You get extra back on your tax return.
But you cannot withdraw though.
No, you can't. If you do, you'll get taxed on that. But the idea is it's for long-term savings. It's for when you're old, when you're not working, as sort of a safety net. And I think that's a good thing because most people, if they have large amounts of money, they're going to spend it on things they don't necessarily need. Yes.
Okay, so we put money in RRSP, and then because we cannot withdraw in between, there's a maturity period after that you can withdraw. The money value will go down eventually, first thing. And the second thing is if we want the money back, we have to pay tax a higher amount. Do you think it's a wise decision to put in RRSP? And if you think so, why?
It can be if you do it the right way. So there's sort of three things here. Number one is that the RSP should be a long-term thing, right? Like if you're putting money into an RSP, you should have no intention to use it except for maybe buying your first house. So that's number one. And the reason is because, and you shouldn't contribute to your RSP if you don't have the emergency fund, right? So if there's a reason for you to use money, right? Trip to Hajj, children's education, an emergency comes up, you should have other sources of funds to do those things. The RSP should be for the long term. It should be for your for retirement, for a long term type of thing. Now, with the RSP,
So long term is how many years are we talking about?
when you're 65. So however long it is between now and then, or 60, 65, whatever the case may be. So that like long term, 20 plus years, yeah.
And what if we die?
Then
We
you,
never get to use it. Who is going to use that money?
your children.
They can?
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to access? Do they have to
Well,
pay tax?
no, you're gonna give it to them as a beneficiary. Yeah. So what happens is, you save it up for the long term, and of course it won't go down in value because you'll invest it in a halal way where you're going to earn some profit, so it'll grow over the years. So you won't be, having it lose its value and be stuck. It'll be growing over the years because you're leaving it alone. It'll be earning profit, et cetera, et cetera. So to give you an example, and you can do this calculation at home, if you put in, just do a calculation of putting in $100 a month, or $50 a month, or $500 a month, whatever you can do, easy, comfortably, that you won't even notice, right? And just see how much it's going to be worth if you get a profit of roughly 8% a year for the next 20 years, right? You'll see that it's probably going to be worth more than $100,000 that you can use for, in your retirement, that you can use in your old age, whatever the case may be. And the fact of the matter is, everybody in the Muslim community should be doing this because of the fact that Canada Pension Plan and old age security for Muslims is going to be lower than it would be for your average Canadian. And the reason for that is because we're mostly an immigrant community
So, we came here later in life?
That's right, because you haven't contributed to it for as long. So the average Canadian gets about $700 a month in Canada Pension Plan and $700 or so in old age security. But the average Muslim, I don't have hard numbers on this, but I'm just thinking that it's probably going to be lower because most of our community comes in their 30s, 40s, maybe even later in life, so they haven't had as long to contribute to the Canada Pension Plan, which means that when the time comes for them to get their benefit, unless they're a physician or something like that, like a really high-paying job, they're most likely going to be getting less. So this is why using your RSP and saving something for the long term is really important.
How about the pension? If someone is getting pension, they have to pay the taxes too?
That's right. Yeah.
Like a normal.
Canada pension plan is taxable. Old age security is taxable. The money you take out of your RSP is also taxable. Now the theory, of course.
Pension is taxable too.
Yeah, it's all taxable. The government doesn't let you get away without paying tax. But the thing to keep in mind is that typically when you are retired and you're older and you're not working, you're paying far less tax than someone who's actively working and earning income, right? Your average person in Canada is probably paying between 25 and 30% in taxes. When you compare that to someone who's retired and not working, it's significantly less. So the idea is,
How less it going to be?
well, again, it all depends on income, right? So if in your retirement you're taking out $100,000 a year, like it's not going to do anything. But most people who are retired are in that sort of $3,000 a month range, which you'll probably be taxed at 15%. So that's really important. Now, another account that you should be aware of, and if you don't ever want to pay taxes on your money, it's called the tax-free saving account. So the tax-free saving account is great because it is flexible. You can put money into a tax-free saving account anytime. You can take the money out anytime. Any profit you earn will never be taxed again. So each year you get approximately $6,000 of your room. This year, 2023, you have $6,500 of room. And if you contribute the full amount in a year, let's say you contributed $6,500, and let's say it earned a 10% profit of $650, you pay no tax on that profit that you earn. And as I mentioned, you can take the money out anytime. So a lot of people use the tax-free saving account as a tool for saving for Hajj. And the reason they do that is, of course, because Hajj is expensive. You got to save up at least $12,000. But you can do that. You can have the money invested for a few years and have it grow so that you don't have to work quite as hard to get to Hajj. And then when you get there and you get to the point where you need the money, you can pull it out, no tax, right? And that's anytime. Whether you pull it out a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, there will never be taxes on that money again. But it doesn't save you any taxes today, right? So the RSP today, it will lower how much tax you pay. It'll probably give you a bigger tax refund. The tax-free saving account, it won't lower your taxes at all. It won't save you anything on taxes, but you'll never have to pay tax on money you put in there ever again. So it's up to you to kind of decide, what do I want to do with this money, and how is it best for me? The last one, are there any questions on the tax-free saving account?
Well, the tax-free saving account, you are putting money and it's being invested somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not that it's sitting and we are having interest on it.
No, it'll be invested in a halal way.
Okay. And it will be invested in a halal way with Canadian Islamic Wealth or
Of
any
course.
other institution?
No, it won't be invested in halal with anyone except for Canadian Islamic Wealth. Actually, there's a couple other options that you do have. So obviously I'm biased. Canadian Islamic Wealth is my company, and if you wanted to open up a tax-free saving account or RSP or any of these things, we can make sure it's taken care of in a halal way. Of course, you do have other options, right? You can check out Wealth Simple. They do have a halal option. It's all electronic, so you're going to have to kind of figure everything out for yourself, but they do have an account that you can open there. You also have the option of Sharia portfolios. I don't know whether or not they give advice, but they have halal options as well. And you have the option of Manzil. From what I've seen, the only group that has a halal option and offers financial advice is Canadian Islamic Wealth. But ask yourself what's important. Do you want to have to figure everything out for yourself? Do you want to have to figure out how much you should put into an RSP to save you the most on taxes? Do you want to figure out how much to put into a TFSA in order to go to your Hajj? Do you want to figure out how much you should put away for your kids' education to make sure that they get a good education? If the answer is no, Canadian Islamic Wealth. If the answer is yes, I want to figure out all of that on my own, you can go to anybody else. You had a
Can we
question?
move, if we have already opened our RSP or TFSA account, can we move it to other institutions? Or do we have to pay something? Do we have to bear some loss?
So typically, you can move any of your accounts to any institution in Canada. It would be a simple matter of transferring it from one institution to another. Usually, they do charge anywhere from $50 to $150 for you to transfer out. So if you were to transfer from Scotiabank to RBC, it would probably cost you anywhere from $50 to $150. That being said, Canadian Islamic Wealth, we cover all the transfer fees for our clients who move money to us. The last account I wanted to talk about was the RESP. Actually, I've got two more I'm going to talk about. RESP, which is the Registered Education Saving Plan. So the Registered Education Saving Plan, this is probably the most important plan for sisters. I don't want to, tell you what to think, but most of the sisters that I've dealt with get the Canada Child Benefit. And one of the things that they want to use the Canada Child Benefit for is to help their kids pay for their education. So what you want to do is you want to open up a Registered Education Savings Plan. With a Registered Education Savings Plan, for every dollar you put in there, you get a 20% grant from the government. This is up to $500 per year and $7,200 over the lifetime per child. So if you have 3 kids, you can get over $21,000 for your kids by putting money into the Registered Education Savings Plan. Now, let's say, for example, you have 3 kids. One of them wants to take something, I don't want to call it easy, but maybe they want to be an electrician or they want to go to trade school, something like this, and the other wants to be a doctor. What do? You put in equal amounts for all of them. Does that mean you have to give up the grant money and all the money you saved? No. What you want to do is you want to open up something called a family RESP, Family Registered Education Savings Plan. And what this will do is it will allow all the children to pull from that pool of investments, right? So if one of them wants to go to trade school, typically that's relatively cheap to do, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and then they're probably done. Someone wants to go to medical school, well, it'll cost an arm and a leg and a lot of money too. What you can do with the RESP, a family RESP, is you can transfer the unused money from the child who went to trade school to the other child who wanted to go to medical school, as an example. The last point I wanted to talk about, 2 more things. One more account is the Registered Disability Savings Plan. So not everybody qualifies for this. In order to qualify for the Registered Disability Savings Plan, you or your child or whoever needs to qualify for the disability tax credit. If you or your child or somebody qualifies for the disability tax credit, then you can open up a Registered Disability Savings Plan. The beautiful thing about the Registered Disability Savings Plan is you can get up to $3 for every dollar that you contribute. So if you put in $1,000, the government will put in $3,000, right? And it's graded. So I think it's the first 1,000 the government will put in 3, the second 1,000 the government will put in 2, the third 1,000 the government will put in 1, right? So you can get up to, I believe, $7,000 of grants within a single year by contributing to the Registered Disability Saving Plan.
But it's too hard to save money.
I agree. It's hard to save money, but what do you do?
It sure is hard. But we are spending it anyway. Just maybe a little bit more organized helps us.
Well, so here's a trick, right? And it's called the pay yourself first method, right? So one of the things that most people do, the grand majority of people do, is they pay all their bills, and then whatever's left over, they'll try to save. This is a mistake. You're doing it the wrong way. What you need to do is you need to put money aside first and then pay all your bills, right? And at the end of the day, this is something I highly recommend because yes, we need to pay our bills on time and we need to pay people we owe money, the money that they owe and the money that they deserve. However, if you get into a situation where you need money, you can't call up Rogers, you can't call up TELUS, you can't call up Manitoba Hydro and say, hey, listen, you remember that $200 I paid you? Can I get it back? I'm in a bit of a jam. No. Are you kidding me? They're not going to give you anything. So always pay yourself first. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Let's say you earn $1,000, $5,000, $2,000, 5%, 10% of that. 5 to 10% of that, start with that. Make sure it's super easy. Make sure you don't even notice that you're putting that away, right? And once that feels really easy and that you don't even notice it, then you start to add a little bit more, right? So if 5% is really easy, you don't even notice that. Most of us probably spend 5% of our income on coffee and donuts and going out and doing things we don't necessarily want to do, right? So think about that. But think about how much that's going to help you or help your children or help someone with a disability in your family. You take advantage of the registered disability savings plan. So start that way and then increase it over time once it feels easy and once it feels second nature, right? Because one of the things, so if we start with that habit, I think it'll make a lot of people's lives a lot easier. So the last thing I'm going to touch on here, and I'll be done with this quickly because you asked about it, is the, protect yourself, protect your family. What does that mean? I'm talking about life insurance, of course. So, of course, there's a difference of opinion among scholars on whether or not life insurance is halal. Totally respect it, and if you're of the camp that believes it's completely haram, this does not apply to you.
No, it's a halal.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think so too.
It's halal because we're paying that one.
Yeah. So what I will say is that the difference of opinion is as follows. Most of the scholars say that the reason insurance is impermissible is not because of insurance itself, it's because of what it contains. And what most insurance policies contain are excessive amounts of uncertainty and interest, right? So your typical insurance policy is, if you pay into this for the next 20 years and you die, we'll give you $500,000, $1 million, whatever. If you don't die, we will keep all of your money, right? So this is too much uncertainty. Most scholars say that this type of transaction is not permissible, right? And the other issue is most insurance companies, when they take your premiums and your payments, they'll take that money and they will invest it in bonds, they'll invest it in mortgages, haram things, right? So what we need to do is, if we do want to take life insurance, we need to find ways to avoid, number one, the uncertainty, and number two, the interest. So how do we do that? There are two types of policies that I've done a lot of research on that I believe will be acceptable for the Muslim community. Number one is universal life insurance. And the reason I say that is because universal life insurance is permanent. We are all guaranteed to die at some point, and so, and typically universal life insurance is a more expensive option. If you pay $20 a month for a term insurance, which is the one I described before, you might pay $100 a month for universal life insurance. But it's permanent, it is guaranteed to pay out at some point, and you get to choose the investments inside there. So you know that it's going to be invested in a halal way. The second type that I believe is halal is critical illness insurance. So critical illness insurance is, it'll pay you 1 to 2 years of your salary if you get sick. So this is cancer, heart attack, stroke, any number of these diseases. But if you don't end up using it and you don't get sick, you can get 100% of the money you put in there back. It doesn't contain any investments, it doesn't contain any interest. You get to keep any amounts that you put in there if you don't end up using it. But if you do use it, then you get the benefit. So those are the two types of insurance that I believe are halal. And I really do think that in this day and age, having something is necessary for Muslim families. Because at the end of the day, especially if you stay home and your spouse is working, if something happens to them, having something in place to kind of cover you, when you're missing out on that income is really important. And unfortunately, there's not enough, initiatives to support widows and, communities and different things like that. Unfortunately, we don't have that in place in this day and age. So in my humble opinion, I believe having some form of universal halal form of life insurance or critical insurance in place is important for personal finance. Yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Critical life insurance, can you please repeat?
Sorry, it's critical illness insurance. And so if you were to get cancer, heart attack, stroke, there's about 50 other major diseases that it covers. it'll pay you 1 to 2 years of your salary, right? So if you earn $50,000 a year or $100,000 a year, you should subscribe for either $100,000 or $200,000 of critical illness insurance. If you get sick, it'll pay out. If you don't get sick, you can set it up in a way where you get all of your money back. So it doesn't deal with the issues of the uncertainty. It doesn't deal with the issues of interest because the money from that policy doesn't get invested.
Yeah.
So those are the two main ones that I recommend that everybody try to put in place, because it'll cover you in the event that you get sick. It'll cover you in the event that somebody dies unexpectedly, and it'll make sure that there's something in place so that your children are provided for if a calamity happens. Thank you everyone for attending. I really hope you got the most out of this when it comes to financial awareness for women in Winnipeg. Make sure that you take advantage of all of these accounts, and always remember to pay yourself first. Start small, it should feel easy. And if you want a little bit of extra help, as always, you can reach out to us at CanadianIslamicWealth.com. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
We reached the end of our episode. Thank you for watching. If you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe, and wait for a new episode from Civic platform.